Wilhelm!
In 1945, right after World War II came to an end, the remaining German soldiers in Denmark were immediately taken prisoner and put to use. Even though Denmark had only been occupied for 5 years, the resentment among its people ran deep. That anger was clearly reflected in a captain named Karl, who had no hesitation in beating a German prisoner as he passed by. After venting his hatred, Captain Karl continued his journey to a nearby beach. He was not there for leisure, but to inspect the countless landmines the German army had planted along the coast during the war. The story then shifts to a group of young German soldiers being transported to a military base. Upon arrival, they were given a brief briefing by a major named Ebbe. Looking at the map, Denmark sat directly above Germany, a highly strategic position with a long coastline. Fearing that British forces might land there and attack from the north, Germany had occupied Denmark and buried tens of thousands of mines along its beaches. Now that the war was over, these remaining prisoners were ordered to clear those mines as a form of atonement. If they refused, they would never be allowed to return home. Before being sent into the field, the boys had to undergo training to learn how to disarm different types of mines. Major Ebbe showed no mercy when mistakes were made, often resorting to violence. It was harsh, but one wrong move could cost a life. Once the training ended, each soldier was tested using a real live mine. The process was terrifying. Not every soldier had the courage to handle an explosive, and some were so shaken by fear that they failed the test entirely. After training, they were sent to their assigned posts on foot, and unexpectedly, one of the mine-clearing units ended up under the command of Captain Karl. Each unit usually consisted of 14 soldiers, and the group led by Captain Karl was made up entirely of teenagers. That fact did nothing to soften his attitude. To him, they were still German soldiers and deserved to be treated harshly. The young mine clearers were sent to the beach to begin their work. Only then did they learn the true scale of the task. They were expected to disarm 45,000 mines, a job that would take at least 4 months if done without a single mistake. Disarming a mine was difficult enough, but finding one was even harder. Most were buried about 20 centimeters underground, and the only tool they had to detect them was a simple metal rod. And this is where their mission truly begins. This is Land of Mine. As the sun set, they were allowed to rest in an old rundown hut. One of the boys tried to lift everyone's spirits by talking about what he might do once he returned home. His words were quickly met with bitterness from Helmut. After all, returning home felt like a distant dream when they had not even been given food by the enemy soldiers. That was why Wilhelm's optimism felt unrealistic. As the group leader, Sebastian stepped in to calm things down, reminding Helmut that his pessimism only made their situation worse. The next morning, their hunger only grew worse. Not far from the beach, there was a local house where a child often played while carrying bread. One of the boys tried to approach the child, inviting him to play and quietly hoping to get a little food. 2 days passed, and Captain Karl still had not brought them anything to eat. Every time he showed up, it was only to order them to sleep or to wake them up at dawn. No one dared to complain, afraid of being beaten. But if things continued like this, starvation would soon take their lives. As the group leader, Sebastian finally gathered the courage to step forward. As expected, his request was completely ignored. The Danish soldiers saw them as nothing more than tools, which was why no food had been sent from headquarters. Unable to endure the hunger any longer, Helmut secretly slipped away that night in search of food. Among the group were 2 brothers, twins named Ernst and Werner. Their hunger had grown so severe that one of them fell seriously ill. Hoping for some leniency, the brothers approached Captain Karl. Unfortunately, even seeing the pale face and high fever, the captain showed no mercy at all. To allow his brother to rest while working, Ernst forced himself to take on double the workload. That day, however, the type of mine they were dealing with proved more dangerous than usual. The trigger was hidden behind a small casing, requiring extreme caution to access. Hunger had already weakened many of them, leaving their bodies shaky and unfocused. Then, without warning, a deafening explosion shattered the air. Wilhelm lost both of his arms in that blast. As the group leader, Sebastian rushed to help him, but the injuries were so severe that some believed it would be better to let him die. Wilhelm writhed in agony, unable to endure the pain, his screams echoing through the hut. The noise eventually drew Captain Karl out, who injected him with morphine. Once things calmed down, Wilhelm was finally transported to the military base for treatment. The next day, most of the boys were left vomiting uncontrollably after being poisoned by food Helmut had secretly stolen from a local animal pen. Captain Karl grew suspicious and began investigating what they had eaten. The only way to stop the poisoning was to force the food out of their stomachs. He ordered them to drink seawater, and as expected, they all vomited shortly after. That afternoon, as the others lay weak and exhausted on their beds, Sebastian once again approached Captain Carl. This time, he carried a homemade tool he believed could make clearing minds easier. They promised to work harder as long as they were given proper food. When the request was rejected, Sebastian refused to stay silent. Hunger at this point had overridden all fear. The next day, Captain Carl went to the military base to check on Wilhelm's condition. The nurse on duty informed him that the boy had already passed away. The injuries from the explosion the day before were simply too severe to be treated. The news stirred a sense of guilt in Carl, and for the first time, he chose to make amends. He brought Sebastian and the others a small amount of food. Boiled potatoes and bread were all they received after days of enduring hunger. The portions were limited, so Sebastian made sure to divide them fairly, only taking his share after everyone else had been served. Not long after, Captain Carl gathered the boys and told them a lie meant to push them forward. He claimed that Wilhelm was recovering and would soon be sent back to Germany. He added that the same future awaited them, as long as they completed the mission on time. With full stomachs and renewed hope, the boys returned to work with energy and optimism. Some even began imagining what life would be like once they finally made it home. At the end of the day, every mine they had cleared was collected and carefully counted to ensure the numbers matched the records. That night, Captain Carl was jolted awake by loud noises. The disturbance came from several Danish soldiers who were harassing Sebastian and his friends. The group was led by Major Ebbe, who was furious that Carl had given proper food to former enemy soldiers. It became clear just how deep the hatred toward German soldiers still ran among the Danish forces. Before leaving, Major Ebbe began to suspect Carl of betrayal. After all, he had taken food from the military base without permission. Carl tried to explain that Sebastian and the others were not like regular German soldiers. They were just teenagers, forced into war by their country, and did not deserve such treatment. The following day, work resumed as usual. This time, Sebastian noticed something alarming. Some of the mines were fitted with 2 triggers instead of 1. He tried to warn the others to stop and find a safer solution, but with everyone spread out across the field, his warning did not carry far enough. Moments later, an explosion tore through the area, killing Werner instantly. The blast was so powerful that his body was completely destroyed. The loss sent his twin brother into immediate shock. Ernst refused to calm down and was quickly taken back to the hut. In an attempt to sedate him, Captain Carl injected him with morphine. Normally, the drug would put someone into a deep sleep almost immediately. But Ernst kept trying to rise from his bed, driven by the desperate hope of finding his brother. In the end, Carl had to physically restrain him and force him to rest. That incident became a turning point for Captain Carl. He began to understand that in war, there is no such thing as true victory. There are only wounds, shared by everyone involved. His guilt deepened when Sebastian revealed that all of the boys already knew Wilhelm had died from the previous incident. They had only pretended not to know, choosing to accept the lie because they understood Carl had told it for what he believed was the greater good. From that moment on, Captain Carl promised himself that he would no longer treat these teenagers as enemy soldiers. Carl's attitude changed completely. When night fell, he stopped locking the hut where Sebastian and the others slept, a small but meaningful sign of trust. Before sunrise the next morning, he quietly slipped into the military base and took as much food as he could carry, determined to make sure the boys would never go hungry again. Once a week, Sebastian and his friends were given a day off. They usually spent it playing ball along the beach. After so much suffering, the boys were finally able to experience something that felt like joy. Not long after, 2 new members joined the group, and they were immediately shocked by how different Captain Carl's behavior had become. After a long day of playing, everyone headed back to the hut for dinner. On the way, Captain Carl began playing fetch with his beloved dog. Without warning, a hidden mine exploded, killing the dog instantly. That single moment shattered everything. Captain Carl was consumed by anger, believing the area should have already been completely cleared of mines. If Sebastian and the others had counted the neutralized explosives correctly, the accident would never have happened. Unfortunately, that one small mistake was enough to break the fragile trust they had built. As punishment, Sebastian and his friends were ordered to recheck the land that was supposedly 100% safe. This time, they were not allowed to use metal rods. Instead, they were forced to walk across the field together. Helmut protested, knowing it was essentially a death sentence. But his resistance was labeled as rebellion. That only strengthened Carl's belief that the boys could not be trusted. Back at the hut, an enraged Helmut immediately began planning an escape. The others warned him that the risks were far too great. The local population despised German soldiers, leaving no safe path out. Even if he managed to cross the border, the friends left behind could suffer brutal consequences, possibly even being beaten to death. The next morning, they were suddenly startled by a local woman whose house stood just across from the hut. She was hysterical, begging for help and saying her child was in danger. Her daughter Elizabeth had been so absorbed in playing with her dolls that she did not realize she was standing right in the middle of a minefield. Sebastian immediately began creating a safe evacuation path, carefully checking every step that would be taken. The problem was that Elizabeth was an impatient child, moving unpredictably and nearly triggering the mines around her. Thankfully, Ernst appeared and managed to calm her down. One by one, Sebastian disarmed the explosives, clearing a safe route. Elizabeth was rescued without injury, but then something felt off. Ernst began acting strangely. Ever since losing his twin brother, he had fallen into deep depression. That explained why he had earlier rushed into the minefield without fear. From the start, that had been his true intention. And just moments later, Ernst stepped on a mine, and his life ended instantly. For the first time, Sebastian broke down in tears. As the leader, he felt he had failed by not recognizing Ernst's condition sooner. Captain Karl tried to comfort him and promised that soon they would all be sent back to Germany. 3 months passed, and by then, tens of thousands of mines had been successfully cleared. On that day, some of the boys were assigned to load disarmed mines onto a truck, while the remaining 4 spent their time along the beach as usual. Everyone felt hopeful, believing their hard work was finally about to pay off. But caught up in conversation, the boys became less careful. Suddenly, the pile of mines on the truck detonated. A single mine was enough to destroy a tank, and there were hundreds stacked together. The explosion happened in an instant, leaving Sebastian and the others who witnessed it stunned and unable to comprehend how it could have happened. After clearing a total of 45,000 mines, Captain Karl kept his promise and allowed Sebastian to return home. The 4 remaining soldiers were loaded onto a military vehicle. Not long after, Captain Karl was summoned to headquarters. Major Ebbe praised Sebastian and his companions, saying no other soldiers had ever managed to clear that many mines. Because of that, the Danish government was unwilling to let them go. Hearing this filled Karl with anger. Instead of being sent back to Germany, Sebastian and the 3 others were transported to a new location. They were devastated, believing they had been betrayed. Captain Karl pleaded with Major Ebbe to reconsider, even risking his own career to ensure the boys could finally return to their homeland. Sebastian was taken back to the beach for his next assignment. This time, the task was even more terrifying. They were ordered to clear a minefield with twice as many explosives as before. Just hearing that was enough to make anyone's knees go weak, because there was no guarantee that luck would still be on their side. As despair set in, an unexpected moment changed everything. A soldier arrived and handed over a note. Shortly after, Sebastian and the others were quietly moved away, only to find themselves reunited with Captain Karl once again. There was no time for explanations. What Karl was doing now was illegal. Their vehicle was already positioned close to the German border, which was exactly why Sebastian and his 3 remaining friends had been brought there. In that moment, Captain Karl gave them their chance. He urged them to run and return to their homeland. At the end of the film, we learned that around 2,000 German soldiers were taken as prisoners of war by Denmark. They were forced to clear at least 1.5 million landmines. As a result, only a small number of them ever made it back to Germany in one piece. So the moral of the story is war does not end when the fighting stops. It keeps killing quietly, stealing childhoods, breaking hearts, and turning survival into a lottery where the youngest and most innocent always pay the highest price.